Life's greatest and most valuable lessons are often hidden deep within its darkest and most difficult moments. Watch, learn, and evolve along with us as we explore the resilience of the human spirit. Hit subscribe to stay updated on every new lesson.
The voicemail came in at 6:47 on a Thursday morning, while I was still in my robe pouring the first cup of coffee I hadn't yet earned. I almost deleted it without listening. The number wasn't saved in my phone, a 614 area code I didn't recognize, and I'd been getting a lot of spam lately, the kind that opens with a recorded woman's voice telling me my car's extended warranty was about to expire. I set my mug down, hit play, and lifted the phone to my ear, mostly out of habit. It wasn't a recording. It was a real woman's voice, careful and low, like someone speaking from a room where they didn't want to be overheard. She said my name once. Then she said, "Before your anniversary dinner tomorrow night, I think you should look inside your husband's gym bag. The one he keeps in his trunk. I'm sorry, I really am." Then she hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time after that. The coffee was getting cold. The refrigerator made its usual hum. Everything was exactly the same as it had been 30 seconds before, and nothing was the same at all. My husband and I had been married for 11 years. We'd met at a mutual friend's housewarming in Columbus when I was 28, and he was 31, and we'd spent the first 4 months arguing about whether Nashville was better than Knoxville before we admitted we were in love. We had a house we'd renovated together, badly at first and then better, and a dog named after a character from a novel I'd loved in college, and a running joke about the soup he'd burned so badly on our second date that the pot had to be thrown away. 11 years of the accumulated texture of a life. Our anniversary dinner was the next evening at a place we'd been going to since year 2, the same table by the window when they could manage it, the same bottle of wine we'd discovered there by accident. I didn't call the number back, I'm not sure why. Something about the woman's voice had made me feel that calling her would be the wrong order of operations. That there was something I was supposed to do first. I finished my coffee standing at the counter, then I got dressed, drove to the gym where my husband had worked out that morning before heading to the office, and pulled into our driveway at 8:15 because I'd forgotten my laptop charger. This was true. I actually had forgotten it. The coincidence of it still strikes me sometimes. His car wasn't there. He'd already left. I went inside, got the charger, and stood in the hallway for a moment looking at the door that led to the garage. We didn't keep anything in the garage except the lawn equipment and seasonal boxes and his car when he wasn't using it. His gym bag lived in his trunk, he'd told me once, because it was easier than carrying it in and out. Efficient. He was always efficient about practical things. I went back outside and called him. "Hey," he said. He sounded normal. He always sounded normal. "Did you forget something?" "My charger," I said. "I got it. Have a good day." "You too. See you tonight." I drove to work. I sat through a 10 o'clock meeting about Q3 projections and contributed 2 comments that apparently made sense because no one looked at me strangely. I ate half a sandwich at my desk. I looked at the 6114 area code number 7 times. At 4:30 I told my assistant I had an appointment and left early. My husband's car was in the driveway when I got home, which meant he'd beaten me there, which almost never happened. I sat in my own car for a moment. The garage door was closed. I thought about the woman's voice, the way she'd paused before she said, "I'm sorry," like she practiced the message and that word was the one she'd almost cut. I went inside through the front door. He was in the kitchen, making what smelled like pasta, with his back to me, wearing the gray t-shirt he'd had since before we got married, and that I'd tried to throw away twice. "You're home early," he said, turning around. "So are you." Wrapped up faster than I expected. He held up the wooden spoon in the vague gesture that meant things are under control here. 20 minutes. "I'm going to change," I said. I went upstairs. I didn't change. I sat on the edge of our bed and looked at my hands and breathed the way I'd learned to breathe when something in my chest was trying to climb out before I was ready for it. My therapist had called it grounding before reacting. I'd been in therapy for 2 years because of my mother's illness, not because of anything wrong in my marriage, or what I'd believed was my marriage. I went back downstairs. I asked him if he'd gotten his car washed recently because I'd noticed it needed it. He said probably next weekend. I said I might take both cars. Mine needed it too. He said sure and handed me a bowl of pasta. We ate dinner at the kitchen table. He told me about a difficult client meeting. I told him about the Q3 projections. He poured me a second glass of wine without being asked, because he knew I'd want it. 11 years of that kind of knowing. The unconscious fluency of a shared life. After dinner, I told him I was tired and was going to take a bath and probably read and go to sleep early, which was true. All of it was true. I was very tired. He said he'd watch something in the living room and try not to wake me. He kissed my forehead in the automatic way that husbands do when a marriage has become a comfortable country you've both stopped noticing. I took my bath. I read 4 pages of the same paragraph. I set the book face down on the bathroom tile. In the morning, he left at 6:15 for the gym the way he did every Friday. I listened to his car back out of the garage and waited until the sound of it had fully disappeared down the street. Then I got his spare car key from the hook by the back door and went out to the garage. The gym bag was where he said it always was, in the trunk, dark green canvas with a broken zipper pull he'd been meaning to replace for 2 years. I unzipped it on the floor of the garage with the overhead light buzzing yellow above me. There were his usual things, a change of clothes, deodorant, sneakers. He kept separate from his gym shoes. A phone charger coiled around itself. A paperback he'd been reading. And at the very bottom, tucked underneath the paperback like it had been placed there carefully or hurriedly or both, a small envelope. Not sealed. My name written on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize, printed in the careful block letters of someone who didn't want their penmanship identified. Inside was a photograph. It had been taken somewhere I recognized immediately. The bar at the Hilton downtown, the one with the green velvet booths and the low pendant lights. My husband and I had been there for a colleague's retirement party 2 years ago. I remembered the booth specifically because the velvet had seemed impractical, and I'd said so and he'd laughed. In the photograph, he was sitting in one of those booths. His arm was around the woman beside him. She had dark hair and was laughing at something, her head tilted toward him, and he was looking at her with an expression I recognized, the way you recognize a piece of music from the first 3 notes. I'd seen him look at me that way, not recently. Behind the photograph there was a folded piece of paper. 3 sentences. This has been going on for 8 months. She works at your husband's firm. I thought you deserved to know before you celebrated another year together. No signature. I sat on the garage floor for a while. The concrete was cold through my pajama pants. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler system clicked on and ran through its cycle and clicked off. I did not cry. I noticed this about myself with the same detached awareness I'd felt every other time. Something enormous happened to me and my body went quiet instead of loud. I'd been the same way when my mother was diagnosed. The people in the room had cried, and I'd been the one asking the doctor questions, writing down the answers in a notepad I'd happened to have in my purse, and only later, in the car alone, had I finally come apart. I photographed a photo and the note with my phone. I put them back in the envelope. I put the envelope back under the paperback. I zipped the bag, put it back in the trunk, closed the garage, and went inside. I called the 614 number. She answered on the second ring. She said her name but asked me not to use it, and I've respected that. What she told me she did at the company where my husband worked, she was a paralegal, had been there for 3 years, sat 2 offices down from the woman in the photograph. She'd noticed things over the past several months. Habits. Schedule overlaps. The particular way 2 people look at each other when they believe no one is watching who has any reason to care. She had almost said nothing. She'd gone back and forth about it for weeks. But she knew my husband's anniversary dinner was tonight because it had come up in a scheduling conversation she'd been part of, and something in her had made up its mind. How did you know to call me? I asked. How did you have my number? A pause. Your husband listed you as an emergency contact on his firm profile. It's the same number. Okay, I said, because it was and it wasn't. She asked if I was all right. I don't know yet, I told her honestly, but you did the right thing. She exhaled. It sounded like something she'd been holding for a long time. I spent the morning doing the things I needed to do. I wasn't ready to call a lawyer yet, but I wrote down 3 names in case. I looked at our joint accounts. I took a photograph of every shared financial document I could access. I was not functioning from emotion. I was functioning from the part of myself that goes very still and very methodical when the alternative is falling down. At noon I texted my husband that I was working from home and would be ready at 7. He sent back a heart emoji. We had been together 11 years and he sent me a heart emoji on the day I knew what I knew. I thought about the reservation. I thought about what I was gonna do with what I was holding. And then I thought about something the woman on the phone had said, almost as an afterthought. I heard her on a call last week. She was saying she wanted him to tell you. That she'd been pushing him to tell you for months, and he kept saying he would and he didn't. I thought about that for a long time. He came home at 6. He showered. He put on the jacket I'd given him for his birthday 2 years ago. Dark charcoal, the one I'd picked because I thought he looked handsome in it, which he did. Which he still did, and I hated that. I was standing in our bedroom in the dress I'd planned to wear. I'd done my hair, I'd put on earrings. Everything about the image was the same as every other anniversary. You look beautiful, he said from the doorway. I found the gym bag, I said. The sentence landed in the room. I watched it land. The thing about his face in that moment was that it didn't do what I expected. He didn't go blank or defensive or reach for a denial. He looked like a man who had been waiting for something to arrive and had stopped being able to pretend it wasn't coming. He sat down on the edge of the bed. His jacket looked wrong suddenly, celebratory and misplaced. How long have you known? He asked quietly. Since this morning. Someone called me. Something shifted in his face at that, not surprise at the fact of it, something more like recognition, like he'd known this accounting was always approaching and had simply run out of corridor. I was going to tell you tonight, he said. I know how that sounds. I know you have no reason to believe it. Was that true 8 months ago? Were you going to tell me then? He didn't answer, which was its own answer. I sat down in the chair across the room, the one by the window where I kept a stack of books I was always meaning to get to. We looked at each other across the space of our bedroom, across 11 years of things accumulated between us, and I felt the weight of all of it and also the strange lightness of a secret, no longer pressing down on only one side. Does she want you to leave? I asked. I kept my voice level. I wanted information more than I wanted the satisfaction of falling apart in front of him. She wants me to make a decision. He looked at the floor. She's been asking me to make one for a while. But you didn't. No. Why not? He looked up. His eyes were red, but he wasn't crying. Because I didn't want to lose this. Even when I was. He stopped. I didn't want to lose this. You've already lost it, I said, not cruelly, just plainly. I need you to understand that. Whatever happens next, the thing we had is already gone. You ended it when you made the choice you made. That's not me punishing you. That's just the truth. He nodded. He pressed his hands against his thighs like he was trying to keep them still. I need you to go stay somewhere else tonight, I said, and I need you not to contact me for a few days. I need time to think without managing your feelings at the same time. Okay, he said it immediately, no negotiation. And I need you to tell her it's over, not because I'm asking you to win me back. I need you to tell her because you've been dishonest with both of us, and the least you can do now is be honest. He looked at me for a long moment. Are you? He started. I don't know what I am, I said. I genuinely don't know. But I'm not going to figure it out with you in the house. He changed out of the birthday jacket. He packed a bag with the quiet efficiency of a man who understood he had forfeited his right to object to anything. He paused at the bedroom door. I'm sorry, he said. I know that doesn't. It doesn't, I said. But I heard you. I listened to his car leave the same way I'd listened to it that morning. The house went very quiet. I was still in my anniversary dress. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the restaurant reservation on my phone for a minute before I canceled it. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, the good bottle we'd been saving for the occasion, because I had been through something tonight and I deserved it, and sat down on the back porch where the yard was dark, and the neighbors' lights were on in a comfortable, oblivious way. The dog came and put his head on my knee. I scratched his ears. I didn't call my sister that night. I wasn't ready to make it real in the way that other people's reactions make things real. I just sat there in the warm June dark and let myself feel the shape of what had changed. The first week was the strangest, not because it was painful, though it was, but because of how much mental space suddenly opened up. I'd been carrying something without knowing I was carrying it. Some low-frequency noise I'd stopped hearing because it had been there long enough to become background. The silence where it had been was disorienting, and then, slowly, something else. My sister came on the second Saturday. She brought food, the specific kind, not a casserole, but a whole set of things from the deli we'd grown up going to with our parents. The choices that meant I know you and I know what helps. We sat at my kitchen table for 4 hours. She cried more than I did. I noticed this and didn't feel the need to apologize for it. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "I keep trying to decide and then I realize I'm too close to it. I have a consult with an attorney next week, just to understand what my options look like. That's as far as I've gotten." "That's enough," she said. It was. My husband and I spoke for the first time 11 days after he left. He'd been staying at a hotel and had found a short-term rental by week 2. He said he'd ended things with her. He said it the same way he'd said, "I'm going to tell you." And I filed that away without knowing what to do with it yet. I asked him if she'd been upset. He said she had been. He said she'd been the one, actually, who had pushed him to come clean for the last several months. That she'd told him what they were doing wasn't fair to me, that I deserved to know. That she'd threatened to reach out herself if he didn't. "Is that who called me?" I asked. Silence. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe." I thought about that. I thought about a woman who had been a part of something she shouldn't have been a part of and who had tried, eventually, imperfectly, to stop it from going further. I thought about the voice on the phone, careful and low, the way she'd almost sounded more frightened than I was. I didn't call her. I thought about it. I decided it wasn't what I needed, not because I was angry at her specifically, but because the conversation I most needed to have wasn't with her. The attorney visit was useful in the way that information is always useful, even when it tells you things you don't want to know. I understood my options. I understood what the next chapter could look like in either direction. My husband and I started talking once a week, not about the marriage, not yet, but about the practical things, the house, the accounts, the dog's vet appointment that neither of us had canceled because we both loved the dog and that, at least, was not in dispute. In those conversations, I could hear him trying not to ask me what I was thinking. He was giving me the space I'd asked for with the effortful carefulness of a person who had realized too late how much they had to lose. I appreciated it and I resented it in equal measure, in the way you can feel two things simultaneously when the person you've loved for 11 years has done something you cannot unhappen. What I did in those months surprised me. I started sleeping better than I had in years, which I only recognized as unusual when I remembered how often I'd woken at 3 in the morning for no reason I could name. I took on a project at work I'd been putting off. I started taking the dog on longer walks in the evening, the kind that last an hour and end with both of you tired and the world looking softer. I repainted our bedroom. I'd been wanting to change the color for 2 years and had deferred because he liked what we had. I painted it a deep, warm blue that I loved immediately, and would have chosen years ago if I'd simply chosen it. A colleague I'd always liked, but never spent time with outside the office, invited me to a weekend pottery class that her friend was teaching. I said yes, mostly because I wanted to say yes to things. The pottery was mostly bad. The company was good. I went back. I'm still not sure what my marriage is. That's the honest answer, and I've learned in the past year that honest answers are the only ones worth giving. I know that I am not the same woman who stood in the garage on a Friday morning holding a photograph, and I know that some of what has changed is loss, and some of it is something I don't have a clean word for yet. Growth sounds too simple. Clarity is closer. What I know is this: a woman I'd never met made a phone call she'd been talking herself out of for weeks. She could have decided it wasn't her place. She could have looked the other way every morning when she walked past that office. Most people do. Most people decide the cost of speaking is higher than the cost of silence, and they're not always wrong about that, and yet. She made the call anyway. I think about her sometimes, in the blue bedroom at night, the dog a warm weight at the foot of the bed, the particular quiet of a house that belongs entirely to me. I think about how many people wake up every day inside a story that's been edited without their consent, and how few of them will ever get a call from a stranger who decided at the last minute to tell them the truth. I still don't know her name. I don't need to. But I hope she knows that the thing she almost didn't do was the right thing, and that the right thing has a longer reach than we usually let ourselves believe. If something in you has been asking a question you're afraid of the answer to, pay attention to that. The question isn't fear. The question is information. And sometimes the most important call you'll ever receive is the one from a number you almost didn't pick up. I keep coming back to the woman who made the call. Not because I owe her anything, exactly, or because she's become some kind of symbol I need to hold on to, but because what she did was so quietly difficult and so easy to have not done, and she did it anyway. She carried what she knew for weeks. She talked herself in and out of it. She found a number on a firm directory and picked up the phone on an ordinary morning and said the thing that changed the course of my life, and then she hung up and waited to find out if she'd done the right thing. That's what I think about when people ask me how I got through it. Not my own strength, though I did find some. Not clarity arriving all at once, because it didn't. What I think about is how cause and consequence move through people's choices in ways that are slow and invisible until suddenly they aren't. She chose honesty when silence was easier. My husband chose avoidance until avoidance ran out of road. I chose to pick up a phone from an unknown number instead of deleting it. Each of those choices led somewhere. Choices always lead somewhere, even the ones we make by doing nothing. What I understand now, that I didn't fully understand before, is that integrity isn't a quality you either have or don't have. It's a decision you make in small moments when no one's watching and the cost of doing right is higher than the cost of looking away. The woman on the phone could have looked away. She had every logical reason to. Instead, she paid the cost, the discomfort of involving herself, the risk of being wrong or unwelcome or ignored. That's what real honesty looks like. It's not comfortable. It doesn't come with a guarantee. It costs something, and you do it anyway. The intelligence I needed wasn't the kind that analyzes spreadsheets or manages a project timeline. It was the quieter kind, the ability to sit with what I knew without reacting from panic, to photograph the evidence before confronting anyone, to ask my husband the questions that would tell me the most with the fewest words, to understand that what I needed first was information, not relief. That kind of thinking is something you have to practice, and I had practiced it, partly by necessity, partly because I'd been through hard things before and learned that the clearest mind in the room is usually the most useful one. And the endurance, the part where you keep choosing the next right thing even when nothing feels settled, that was the longest part. Painting the bedroom, going to the pottery class, taking the dog on the long walks. None of those things fixed anything, but they were all acts of deciding, quietly and without an audience, that my life still belonged to me and that I intended to keep living it forward. I'm still in the blue bedroom. The dog still sleeps at the foot of the bed. Some mornings I wake up and the quiet feels like loss, and some mornings it feels like space, and I've stopped needing it to be one or the other. What I know is that the truth, however it arrives, is something you can work with. A lie you're living inside is something that slowly works on you, whether you know it or not. I didn't know, and then I did. And everything that came after, difficult as it was, came from standing on ground that was actually real. That's what I tell anyone who's been where I've been. Trust what you're standing on more than what you've been shown. And if someone calls you from a number you don't recognize, pick up.